Hello, everyone. I'm J.R. Watson, a first-year graduate student at American University in their Arts Management graduate program. Thank you for watching the Leadership and Artistic Direction in the Performing Arts panel, which is a part of the Emerging Arts Leaders Symposium at American University. I would like to say a special thanks to Americans for the Arts for the generous support of EALS Online. So let's introduce the panelists. Um, we have Jason Lowith. He is the artistic director of Only Theater Center, where he has directed Mary Stout, On the Town, Every Brilliant Thing, Sweeney Todd, Angels in America, Part 1, Carousel, Avenue Q, How to Succeed in Business, and the world premiere of Stephen Dietz's Rancho Mirage, or is that
Very close, very close.
As a playwright, Jason won Lucille Lortel and Outer Critics Circle Award for Adding Machine, a musical, which he co-wrote with composer Jason Schmidt. Other recent works include the world premiere of Janance's Schaefer's Broke, Alliance Theater Atlanta, and a dozen plays for Chicago's Next Theater Company, where he served as artistic director from 2002 to 2008. Next, we have Ginny Wales. She is the artistic director at Heritage Theater Festival, the professional theater in residence at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia. Ginny is also associate professor of practice in the Department of Drama at the university. Then we have Sean Elias. He is a Tony Award nominated, internationally award-winning educator, actor, and director with a background in both performance and theater for community development. Sean is committed to holding space for the stories of underprivileged communities to be heard, seen, and ultimately felt. Sean Elias currently serves as artistic director of Iron Crow Theater, Baltimore's award-winning professional queer theater. Under his leadership, the theater has experienced its largest phase of growth in history, breaking every record the theater previously held. He is also the founding chair of the internationally award-winning Performing Arts Department of Jemsey School, a private school in Owings Mills, Maryland, serving students with dyslexia, and other language-based learning differences. Sean holds a BFA in musical theater performance from the University of the Arts and a master's in theater education from Emerson. And last but not least, we have Maria Manuela Goinez. She, hers, her. She is the artistic director at Woolly Mammoth Theater Company. Prior to joining Woolly, she served as the director of producing and artistic planning at the Public Theater, where she oversaw the day-to-day execution of a full slate of plays and musicals at the Public's 5 theater venues at Astor Place and the Delacorte Theater for Shakespeare in the Park. Earlier in her career at the Public, she managed some of the theater's most celebrated productions, including Hamilton. Maria is a first-generation Latinx American born to parents who immigrated from the Dominican Republic and Spain. She was raised in Jamaica, Queens, and has a collection of hoop earrings to prove it. She earned her bachelor's of arts in 2001 from Brown University. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see. Is there anything that I missed that you guys would like to throw out there? Okay. So first thing I would like to cover as your artistic directors, I would like to hear the mission statement / goals of your organization. So I'll go and start with Jason.
Oh, lucky me. Thanks, JR. Only Theater is 82 years old and produces, presents, and tours extraordinary theater for a diversity of audiences and communities in our area. And our vision is to unleash the creativity of our artists, our patrons, our staff, and our volunteers through a wide range of educational and storytelling opportunities. That's the elevator pitch.
Okay, so Jenny.
So Heritage Theater Festival is 45 years old, and we produce 4 pieces over the course of 10 weeks in the summer and are focused on creating work that provides an intersection between our students, faculty, staff, and community members in the greater Charlottesville region with working professionals from all over the country to provide classic works, new works, and musicals for our community.
Awesome. So Sean.
Sure. So Iron Theater actually just turned 10 years old this year. So we're the baby theater on the panel. And we are a queer theater. So our mission is to produce queer theater for what we believe to be a queer city. I personally believe Baltimore to be one of the most queer cities that I've had the privilege of living in. And we do that in a variety of ways. And that's through our belief in excellence of presentation, through our values and our sort of pretending like we're a bigger theater than we are to sort of get to where we want to be, and to really commit to the artists that do this work, to support them and make sure that they're able to take those brave, bold choices and risks on stage to elevate the stories of communities that aren't often elevated.
Awesome. And Maria.
Hi, everybody. So Woolly Mammoth is 40 years old. We actually turned 40 this year. I just followed the founder and artistic director emeritus, Howard Shawitz, who founded the company in 1979, 1980. And essentially, it's always been a theater company that challenges the mainstream, even with the name. So it's a theater company that is meant to create experiences that galvanize artists and audiences in new, challenging, unexpected ways, right, to engage with our world. And one of our core values is radical inclusivity, and we've been really leaning into that. So thinking about whose stories aren't on our stage and aren't represented, and how can we actually sort of think about marrying both artistic innovation and play with form with a kind of social civic provocation.
Awesome. So since we have gotten a feel for your organizations, let's go ahead and talk about the most pressing issue that the arts are facing, coronavirus 2020. So in Maryland and DC, gatherings of 50 people or more were asked to stop, and UVA is conducting courses online until further notice, which has put a stop to pretty much all of the arts as in the traditional form and in the traditional understanding that we have. And some scientists say that the coronavirus could last until at latest mid to late August. So first off, what as an artistic director has the pandemic taught you that you would like to share? And how do you stay positive in times like these? So I'll let whoever wants to start, go ahead and start.
So I could say for us as a smaller theater, it has really taught me the responsibility that the organization has to the resident artists and the artists that we work with most often. I think that came out of an immediate need. As you mentioned, our season had been canceled as well, and so we had, artists who were contracted for shows up and through June, and so for us, the immediate reaction was like, "Oh my God, how do we continue to pay these contracts, right? Some of them both equity or not equity, and make sure that we're able to support these people who are either using this gig as a way to support themselves as their livelihood or are using it to supplement their income." So for me, I learned how important it is to make sure that we have those resources, those funds specifically, to make sure that we're able to support artists in time of crisis, and that we have a responsibility to do that. I don't think that was ever, you think of financial responsibility as like something that the government is required to help the people, or your family, or the state, but to really have that so quickly focus in on, no, it is our responsibility to make sure that these people are sustained, was eye-opening and immediate.
I think that's great, Sean. I think recognizing that we, as arts leaders and arts institutions, have a responsibility to the people we employ, the artists who are the lifeblood of our community, and have turned the DMV into such a dynamic theater community. Those folks don't have the kind of backstops that we do as institutions, no matter how small or how large. And remembering the other constituent that is our audience, that are looking for, they're used to coming to us to tell stories. So we're learning very quickly how we can continue to be storytellers for them, even if we can't do what we exist to do, which is sit in a small room together in close quarters and bear witness to remarkable truths. How can we use our unique talents to continue telling stories is something that we are all learning very rapidly to do. I'll just also very quickly say, I have learned through this crisis another thing as an institutional leader: what makes a helpful board member and what makes an unhelpful board member. So those are a couple of things from me.
I think Maria has some experience with that too, if I read enough.
Yeah, yes. The answer is yes. I love what everybody's saying, and I totally concur. The thing that has been most surprising to me, well, not like, I felt like I knew it in my gut, but it is just really sort of laying itself bare with folks canceling their seasons and furloughing staff and stuff. It's just what a small margin that arts organizations work within, and that it's hard to tell the story of how we actually survived. Not a lot of people actually really understand how much earned ticket sales, etc., whatever, really contribute, and how much, like, say, one or two really outstanding board members are actually keeping these places afloat, which is, when you are faced with something like this, like a plague, it's like it just really tips the balance in a way that even the largest organizations that have endowments, etc., are having to are forecasting in ways that are trying. I have to believe, on the bright side, that they're trying to do this so that they will stick around. And unfortunately, it has immediate and very dire and difficult repercussions for our community in this very moment. And so I'm, not to pick sides or anything. It's just, it's really a very, very difficult situation on all sides. And then the thing that I've been sort of like a bright light or a bright spot or whatever is just like been trying to think, instead of scarcity, to think abundantly, sort of taking the teachings of Adrienne Marie Brown, who I think is an amazing philosopher for our time. And it's just so easy in this moment to just be like slash, 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 and not actually think about, wait a minute, what are the things that we actually, how can we actually turn our brains to a 180 from that and say, what is it that we can all do collectively in this moment to talk about the theater as a public good, to talk about it not as a luxury, to talk about communal gatherings as actually really integral to our culture and our world. And that's really hard to do at this moment, but it is imperative. It's imperative.
I think we're learning that. I mean, everybody is learning that the desperation and anxiety that people are feeling is because they can't have the communal gatherings that they have been so used to. So if there will ever be a moment, it will be as we come out of this crisis that we communicate, as some of the things you've seen on Facebook. What did you turn to in your quarantine? You were desperate for art. You were desperate for people to tell you stories on television or whatever, whenever way you could. And B, what is the thing that you miss the most? Going to a concert, going to a sports event, going to the movies, going to they didn't miss going to the dentist. They missed the kind of things that we can offer. So yes, absolutely, Maria, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot that's continuing. I'm not sure I'm even able to process everything in this moment because things are changing continually so rapidly, but I feel like that there's been a greater awareness on an individual and a collective level. What we do is plan, and we try to foresee things that may or may not go wrong, or that we can put in place to support our artists and our company. And this is something that no one has navigated before. And so I think there's been, for me at least, a bit of a collective unity in embracing that, and knowing that no one necessarily has all of the correct or appropriate answers. But if we can stay focused on meeting individuals where they are, I think that's also really been important, is to ensure that communication is even more clearer now, in the sense of unknowing, which is really tricky since we don't know necessarily what's happening day to day. But everyone's processing what's happening in our world, I think, through their own individual lens. And so I think I've really learned to marry, and I've been challenging myself to marry the needs of our individual company members and staff with the needs of the collective organization as well. And that's been a challenge, and also freeing as an opportunity to listen more and be present more, and to be more forgiving with myself, that simply because I'm in a position of leadership does not necessarily mean that I have all of the answers about how to navigate moving forward.
And in just terms of like bright spot, one thing that, and maybe this is because one of our taglines is, we celebrate the renegade and the unorthodox, so here it is coming out, but just the power that we have, like we just by staying home made the government give us $1,200, right? Like we have such a collective power as a society that we forget just by what we choose to do and what we choose not to do. And I mean that both in the tangible capitalist economic sense, but also in the social emotional realm as well. And so I hope that this brings that to the forefront of people's minds, that we do have power in the way that we live our lives and how we impact other people's lives.
I certainly think that that what both you, Sean, and Maria are talking about, the sense of the power of collective action, is something that we should bring from this. I'll confess to being a little disappointed by having made theater in New York and Los Angeles and Chicago. DMV is a little behind, at least I find, in its professional theaters in terms of trying to work together for collective benefit. I think that this crisis will hopefully help us move to a different way of thinking and working, because it's been a long time coming. And I'll also just quickly say what we're hearing from the folks on this panel, which is so heartening. Anytime there's a crisis, personal or institutional, the crisis reveals the values of the institution and reveals the values of the leaders. And so when you look at any institution, and you see how are they responding? Are they responding in a way to try to preserve the institution at the cost of other artists? Are they trying to, how are they responding to the crisis? Their values are going to come rising to the surface. You'll be able to see exactly what they stand for and what they believe in.
I just want to say it's very interesting to me that you are talking about the DMV and the collective and coming together when you yourself are on the advisory board of Theater Washington and doing a ton of work in that regard in our area. So I just want to point out there are Theater Washington is doing a lot of stuff, and we do have some roundtables and stuff. And for sure, it may not be, it's a smaller place than New York and Chicago and stuff, but I really want to applaud Theater Washington and the work you're doing with them, Jason, and I don't want them to be lost in this,
I think I totally agree. I mean, Theater Washington has something I think really helpful to know. Theater Washington has really stepped up and has had something Eric Schaefer from Signature put together many years ago the Taking Care of Our Own Fund, which is now called the Taking Care Fund, for folks who are, have folks in the field who have unpaid medical bills or don't have access to insurance. Theater Washington, very much at Amy Austin's inspiration, decided to open up half of that fund to unemployed theater artists and theater makers, everybody from house managers to back of house crew to actors to whatever, folks who had their shows canceled, to get checks of, sort of their federal government bailout checks of $500 a piece, as long as we can afford to do it. So yes, absolutely true. I just, and I don't mean to denigrate the efforts of those who are very communally minded. We are so
Or
lucky.
your own.
Well,
Or your own.
Well, we need more people like you, Maria, in town to be running theaters and waving that flag. And anyway, it's getting better. Sorry. All right. Bitch session about DNV over. Yay, theater.
Okay, so now that we touched on the crisis, let's move on to the intersection of artistic practice and management. So real quick, if you guys could all just give a few important skills. Well, what is it to be an artistic director to you? And what are a few skills that you contribute or you find important to be an artistic director? And once again, I'll let whoever wants to go first, go ahead and go.
Okay, I went first last time, so I'm feeling the pressure to repeat. But I will say that for me, I feel like that's such a question you ask at the end of your career when you're looking back, and I feel like I'm just beginning this journey. But what I find is that an artistic director, as much as they're an arts leader, they're a people leader. Something that I think that I bring to the table in that regard is, for better or for worse, I have a wonderful ability to handle ambiguity. So I don't have to have all the answers. I don't need all the answers right now. I'm comfortable making decisions that serve the moment, that may lead to a better decision moving forward. And I think that empowers my team and the artists that I work with, because I expect them to show up with answers, right? It's not something that I know. I'm the omniscient, all-knowing. And so I think that allowing people to show up, I think especially in our industry, so many of us suffer from imposter syndrome. Can I really be here? Should I, even for me, right? I was like, ooh, with Jason, Maria, and Jen, am I even supposed to be on this panel? And so allowing people to show up and say, no, I value your opinions and your thoughts and your solutions and your expertise, I think has been instrumental in moving my organization forward, but I think any organization forward.
You really took what I was going to say. Shouldn't have let Sean go first. I really think that I was, if I didn't become an artistic director, I know this is bizarre, there were going to be two other things that I was going to do, and both of these skills are completely, you put these two things together and it makes an artistic director for me. One was I was going to be an accountant, because I come from a long line of accountants, believe it or not. My grandfather, my brother, my father, all the way back as far as we can go. And then the other thing I was going to do is be a rabbi, which is about gathering community and how you talk to people. And I honestly think that an artistic director is 50% accountant, 50% rabbi, and then somehow there's artistry involved and creativity.
These are such good answers. I don't even know. I'm just want to say yes. I agree. I think to go on the rabbi thing, I think the thing that I find really helpful is empathy, and that goes with the rabbi and collective uniting individuals towards our collective goals and ensuring whenever those moments dip, because they will dip, right? You will have moments where you're questioning, or when you have that bad day, or when something doesn't necessarily work out. So having empathy tied with staying focused and keeping us on what our ultimate goals are in service, not only to our company members, but truly to our community, because we're creating work to share with our community. So I think trying to find the balance and focus of marrying those qualities together has been has been helpful. But I agree with Sean also. It's kind of like, it feels like a question that at the end of your career, you can look back and say, well, what did help and what didn't help? Because there are days when sometimes more of a really clear, definitive response and feedback is what's needed in a situation. And sometimes it's allowing space for individuals to share their feelings so that we can get those out to get back to the work. So I mean, it shifts, it feels like to me.
Yeah, I concur. I guess the only thing that I would want to add is I am a pretty new artistic director. I started in September 2018, and so I definitely am sleeping less than before I was an artistic director. Just because that responsibility is weighs heavy and is a great opportunity, there's no question. And the thing that I would want to add is I'm really hoping that the theater moves away from the cult of personality leadership that has been the case for a long time and into a kind of more shared leadership model. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no such thing as an artistic director, but I think that what these moments particularly help us see is who on our staff is actually sort of like, who are we actually really, really counting on, and how are we working together, and how do we actually show the world that we can actually model the kind of democratic experiment that we want our country to be modeling for us, right? And so that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like everything by consensus. There's lots of different ways to do it, but I'm inspired by sort of thinking about artistic leadership as a way to, for a long time, and in other places that I've worked, the rest of the staff doesn't talk about the art. They go, that's the province of the artistic staff, or I don't really know, I didn't like that play, but what do I know? I don't know dramaturgy. And I just sort of want to be like, whatever, please. Can we actually just engage with the art and just say that, like, right now Maria is in an artistic director position, and even though you're in a director of marketing position, so we each have our areas of expertise, we can still actually engage on a deep level about what the art is doing and what it's about. So that's part of what I'm thinking about in terms of that shared leadership kind of thing. Yeah.
Such a huge that's such a huge hurdle for people to get over. You're totally right. I mean, it feels like you have to invite staff you have to invite staff to be artists. You have to send that invitation out over and over and over again because it is so ingrained in them to believe that they don't have a say.
Well, and I want to say, unfortunately, it is so, we as artistic directors, I'm going to include myself, we actually can wield control over the rest of the staff in that we know better because we have some particular insight or whatever it is into the art making process that they couldn't possibly understand what it means to work on a play and change a play and make it the best possible thing in the world. So I think there is it is an invitation, but there's also a checking oneself of like, how much am I using this moment to basically just get what I want through, that's an artistic issue. You shouldn't be talking about that kind of stuff.
And what I say all the time is like, we don't have audiences full of artistic directors, right? Like most of the people who are experiencing a play aren't trained, don't have a BFA, aren't dramaturgs, right? That's not who our audiences are. And so your opinion and how you responded to something or how you respond to this poster or how you read that email is probably closer to the way our audiences are experiencing this work than how I'm experiencing this work. So I try and use that actually as a way of leveraging their perspective that you may know better than I do in this moment because I'm, from the academy.
Paula Vogel has this fantastic quote, which we use, which we use all the time with our audience, but also with our staff. And we talk about, she says, I write the script the actors, the director, or the designers write the production, but every single audience member writes their own play. And that's, you know, absolutely what you're talking about, Sean, and it's totally true, whether you're internal staff or externally. You know, I love it when the audience member's like, listen, I don't know, I'm not really qualified to judge, but I didn't like it. I'm like, you are qualified to judge because you were supposed to pay, you paid $60. So, I mean, that's not the only reason. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make it sound like it's only a dollar transaction. Of course, it's more than that.
The accountant in you is coming out.
It's true.
Okay, so on top of that, since we do have a couple newer artistic directors, what are some artistic directors that you admire, and what organizations do you look for inspiration?
I admire Maria and Woolly Mammoth.
I admire I mean, I'm just really happy to be in this group, I have to say, and just talking about this. The solitude also of this period for folks means also a solitude in the leadership too. And so being able to actually have an opportunity to talk about this stuff with other artistic directors, I have to say it's really few and far between. And it's not to say that we don't text each other and that kind of stuff or whatever, for sure. But like, I just really appreciate this moment. I have to shine light on Nataki Garrett at OSF, and I have to shine light on Eric Ting at Cal Shakes. They just had to cancel their summer seasons. It must have been the worst decision making, like gut-wrenching, difficult kind of thing. And I just thought that they have been handling that with so much grace and so and skill. And so I want to shine that light because I want everybody who's watching to go and, you know, buy a ticket for their shows, to see them online or do whatever it is that's possible so that those theaters can continue to, you know, shine the light in their area on art and performing arts in the future.
For me, it's so funny to be on a panel with Maria, because so often we look to Woolly Mammoth as an institution of what Iron Crow wants to be here in Baltimore. And so again, another shout out to Maria and the work you're doing there in your organization. I think I want to highlight Megan Carney over at About Faces in Chicago, which is another queer theater. Vincent Lancisi, who is the artistic director here at Everyman. He is somebody who is doing what has done what Iron Crow wants to do, right? They've started from the ground up doing one show a year and have grown to a $25 million equity house. I think the work of Kwame Kwei-Armah at Center Stage and now Across the Pond, and a lot of local institutions are coming to mind too. Signature, right? And the work that they offer and their commitment to excellence in the musical theater form. Arena. I mean, like, we're so lucky in this area to have so many institutions that do such wonderful work. But those are some of the people that come to mind right off the top of the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everyone. It's such a wonderful opportunity to have dialogue with one another, particularly in this moment. I think, you know, I think probably from my personal experience, I was at Playmakers Repertory Company before I got this job. I started in August of 2017 in Charlottesville, so Vivian Benish is the producing artistic director at Playmakers Rep, and not only do I truly admire what she's doing institutionally, but just personally as a human. She's a really generous and empathetic individual who I gravitate towards just personally, which is helpful, because I think what we do is also is so rooted in personal relationships and ensuring that we can kind of unmask that shared humanity that we all have. I really love what People's Light is doing also. I gravitate towards their work as well. And I'm really excited about Robert Barry Fleming at Actors Theater. So those are definitely, and I went to graduate school with Robert Barry Fleming, so it's very exciting for us to kind of be in this radically different institutions, but kind of be navigating these things in a similar Okay, so
Where did you all go?
we went to the Alabama Shakespeare Festival when they had an MFA in acting. And
Oh, no way. You both were actors?
we were both actors. So 2 out of the 6 of our class are now artistic directors, which.
All right. Well, so you all have to do something where you and Robert are in a two-hander on Zoom and do it as a donation thing for both of your theater companies and get all of those people in Alabama and all those other people to tune in. Because I would tune in to see you both act. That would be
That is
awesome.
such a great idea.
I would be so.
Maria.
You've got my $50.
All right, I'm writing it down. That's an amazing idea. That's an amazing idea. Thank you for that. Yes, so those are mine.
As the elder statesman of this panel, I will harken back to a few artistic directors who have been influential to me back in the previous century when I was growing up. No, I'm kidding. I certainly was. My heart goes out to Nataki Garrett, and I'm so excited to see how she will make OSF rise from the ashes. I have to say, her predecessor, however, Bill Rausch, is one of the most inspirational people in my theater making life and career. I've tried so much. I've tried to model and create programs based on what he did at Cornerstone. Incredibly inspirational visionary leader, and I hope he can bring to New York and through that thicket of insane politics what he did for Cornerstone. I also think, thinking about the public, George Wolfe, for all his many flaws, did say a lot of amazing things that were influential to me. I asked him once if he thought directing was an art, and he told me that he felt his writing was an art, his directing was a craft, and producing was a service, like a community service, which I loved and has been sort of something in my head for a while. And then lastly, I'd say before I came to Only, I had the good fortune to work with the National New Play Network for 3 years. And I met a lot of awesome artistic directors of smaller budget theaters that were doing incredible work with new plays. I sort of shout out Olga, Olga Sanchez at Miracle Theater in Seattle. I shout out Tina Packer at Kitchen Dog Theater. Folks who believe so strongly in, it's a little different. It's not the cult of personality in the same way at a small organization, but certainly, like, I think of Tina, her cult of personality, I will totally join. She introduced me to fried butter at the Texas State Fair, and is also an artist of great distinction. And, she's making this teeny tiny theater go for 20 plus seasons, doing new plays that sometimes nobody's coming to see, and sometimes are setting the world on fire. So, I think we learn different things from different, I have learned different things from, I know everybody here on this call has different things from different artistic directors. And I just hope that as I continue into my dotage, that I will remember them all.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that. So we're gonna, since we're starting to run low on time, I'm gonna go and shift the conversation to diversity. How does your organization work towards diversifying the stage and the audience and those who work behind the stage?
I would love to start here, mostly because I want to sort of pick at the word diversity a little bit. It's one of those words that has been now so overutilized, it's sort of hard to understand its meaning. So can I add a question to your question for everybody of like, what do you actually mean when you're talking about diversity? Because to me, it's like, it's not the same as like diversifying a portfolio, or really most of the time we're talking about racial diversity in the theater when we talk about diversity. And so and for me, I've sort of now adopted more of an anti-racist philosophy in addition to equity, diversity, inclusion, and access. So if everybody could be really specific, particularly for those folks at home who are people of color viewing, I know that they would really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up and adding that question. So who would like to go?
I can start, I think. So I started this job in late July of 2017, and most people probably know that in August 11th and 12th, 2017, we had Nazis come to Charlottesville and were in Charlottesville. I don't mean to paint that everyone came from out of town, and I was, and it was a very of course complicated moment for our community, and we became a national flashpoint, a hashtag, and there. I am an alum of the University of Virginia, so I had a relationship to the university, but I had been out for 20 years, and now here I was as an arts leader, and so we have really, we have a lot of, I will start by saying we have a ton of work to do and to be done. We are looking at how do we create a company and program pieces and put teams together that are representative of the world that we want to live in and is a reflection of the world that we live in. We programmed in a year after the events of August 2011 and 12, we programmed The Mountaintop by Katori Hall, and it was the first time that a female African-American playwright had been programmed in 43 years. This season, we're planning to do Jeannie Sakata's Hold These Truths, which is the first time an Asian American playwright will be programmed in 46 years. And Karen Zacharias is the book club play, which is the first time that a Latinx playwright has been programmed in 46 years. And I think that those are the things too that are kind of shocking to me, that we're in this moment where we're programming playwrights of color for the first time in 45 or 46 years. So it kind of bowls me over. And I think where we have been successful is intentionally putting together directors, design teams, and actors that are from a widely varying group of individuals. Where we have a lot of work to do is in hiring our individuals who work behind the scenes, which is a huge portion of our company. And so we're really trying to take a look at how do we hire, how are we hiring, how is that kind of supported through white supremacist practices, you know, like what conventions, how are we doing this, and how can we really create, and not just say we're creating, but how can we over the course of the summer create a company that we want to be reflective of the world that we live in. So I think that's a little bit about what we're trying to do.
To add on to what Jenny just said, after working there for a season and experiencing the talkbacks and conversations after the shows, it was really interesting to see how the community around Charlottesville came in and were willing to have those conversations, even though they were so tough. And I admired that you're doing that and trying to open up the conversation with the artistic work, but continuing it after the show.
Thank you.
For us, I can talk a little bit about queer. So that's a word that many people are still grappling with. For many, it's been reclaimed, but for some, especially of a different generation, it's still offensive, and it means something very specific for them. And so when I'm the second artistic director, the founding artistic director, when he transitioned, said to me, you know, Iron Crow wound up being a gay white man's theater, and I really wish it was a queer theater. And so that has sort of been my call and bearing as a queer man in America as well, to make sure that we educate our audiences on what queer can be and broaden that definition, that it is not just about sexuality, specifically not just about gay or lesbian, that there are gradients and shades and scales and and non-binaries that exist. And those are the stories that we want to tell. And so, borrowing from the independent living movement, there's a phrase, nothing about me without me. And so that's a philosophy that we've adopted here at I Am Crow. We obviously want to tell stories and we want to elevate voices for marginalized communities, be it racial, be it gender, be it sexuality. And for me, I think it's a little hard to talk about them separately. They're so intertwined, especially in our experience in America. So we really try and make sure that we are bringing people to the table whose stories that we are hoping we can bring our resources to elevate and to share, that also believe in that story, right? It's something very different too, and specific, I think, to say, oh, well, this is a play about lesbians, so we're gonna get the lesbian director and call it a day, right? And so we really make sure that what we're producing is produced by the voices that are being elevated and by voices who believe in what that message of the piece is delivering.
I'm eager to hear Maria always talking about. I'm eager to hear all of you actually talking about everything. Yes, I very much appreciate what you're saying, how you started the conversation and helped us frame this conversation, Maria. Like Jenny, Only Theater Center, 82-year-old company, which started in horse country back when there were about 10,000 residents of Montgomery County. Montgomery County now has over 1 million residents and is home to 4 of the nation's 10 most diverse cities in America. Germantown, Rockville, Gaithersburg, and Silver Spring, 4 of the top 10. Looking at that and looking at the people who are sitting in the audience at Only Theater Center, it's shameful. We have so much work to do to make our audience look like all the communities around us, and I think we are continuing to do that work. Representation really matters, but the phrase that we use and that we try extremely hard to believe in is that inclusion drives innovation, and that it's not enough to, we've all heard this before. It's not enough to invite people to the dance. It's not enough to ask them to dance with you. You have to let them be the DJ. So not only do you have to have the people on stage looking like your community, you have to give the keys to the car, to use yet another well-worn metaphor, hand the keys over to people who are not like you, for whatever, in whatever way that is, people who have been dispossessed of the opportunity to drive the car. It would be very, I don't want to go on and say, oh, we've done this and we've done that, we've done this. I think what's important is that we're all trying really hard to move forward and to be radically inclusive in ways that ultimately change how the institution moves forward through time. The only example that I'll give is in our season coming up, if I hope we can do it. We're doing Beauty and the Beast, the sort of most white bread play of them all for the holidays. We're casting Evan Ruggiero, who calls himself Lord Pegleg. He's an amputee, as the Beast. And Jade Jones, if you know her, she was Little Red, and Into the Woods as Belle. Marsha Milgram Dodge is directing, and she really wants to use this play as an opportunity to change the way, especially a young audience. We have 25,000 people come to our holiday shows. A young audience, a new audience, looks at what beauty means in the world. Our last show of the season, our big blockbuster, is going to be The Music Man, in a completely 50-50 deaf hearing production. A deaf director, a deaf co-director and a hearing co-director, deaf designers and hearing designers, a deaf stage manager and a hearing stage manager, 8 hearing actors, 8 deaf actors. And starting from the point of view of asking Alexandra Wales, the deaf director, how do you see, how are we going to go ahead and make Music Man a story about bringing community together? So I guess all I can really say is that the making sure, I didn't direct anything this past year. I'm not directing anything next year. We need to make room at the table so that people can drive the car who don't get an opportunity to drive the car at an organization our size. I've rambled.
No, I don't think you rambled. Pardon me, but the church, I'm on Church Street, and the church is just going ringing like nobody's business. So it's so beautiful, but that's what's happening behind me. if you can hear that. I don't know. I just wish that the conversation was just more nuanced. You know, I really want it to be, and I can't wait for that moment, but I understand that we can only move the speed of trust. A lot of folks, when I got the job at Woolley, said, you know, you're going to be preaching to the choir. It's mostly progressives, et cetera, whatever. And I just look around and see what's happening with our, you know, with our election, with all of, with everything that has been happening in our world. And I just think the choir is pretty divided. We're not on the same page about the systems of oppression. We're not on the same page about the history of slavery and how it shows up every single day. We're just not on the same page. So, so there's like a baseline thing of like what Woolley's been trying to do is just make sure that like our staff and our artists and stuff, like that we can all be on the same page and talking about it, and in the kind of work that we're presenting to try and actually sort of further those conversations. So like Fairview is a really difficult show, right? By Jackie Sibley's Drury. It's not an easy show for people of color or white folks. There's no question. I mean, I had a lot of folks of color who basically saw that production and said it doesn't redeem itself in the last 10 minutes when the woman who is the young girl, who's a Black young woman, is talking about spaces for specifically people of color, and that, you know, looking at the audiences who are traditional theater going audiences and saying like, you don't own that seat. You don't own that seat. So to me, part of what Woolly Mammoth's mission here is to really provoke the conversation and provoke that engagement. So my hope is that for a Woolly Mammoth show, even if you love it or if you hate it, actually the conversation that comes out of it with your friends, with the people who you come with the staff, with whatever, is the thing that we're actually trying to get at, you know? And that there will be enough entertaining stuff over the course of the year that you will want to keep coming back in some way, shape, or form in addition to that. So you know, we've been working with, we brought in Carmen Morgan's company, Art Equity, to come and do a big staff, you know, training. And again, this was about vocabulary and sort of just baseline, like, can we actually all agree that, there are systems that are inhumane and that it is not a personal attack on someone? You know what I mean? When we say that, like, we're upholding, by not talking about it, we're upholding these systems that continue to oppress. Look at who are the people who are quote unquote the essential workers during this isolated period of isolation. And we just say that a lot of the people who are still having to go out there and basically contend with the virus are, you know, not just the medical professionals, but are the people who are, you know, the cleaners in those hospitals, etc. And a lot of that is disproportionate in our country. It really, really affects Black and brown folks. There's no question about it. So when I say like nuance the conversation, you know, I look at myself and I think about what it means to be an artistic director who's a Latina, who, you know, again, I grew up in that culture and I feel my ethnicity, but I also present as a white person, right? So like, you know, I have a different vantage point, and I want to talk to my fellow Latinos who are, you know, white passing, white presenting, etc., and talk about how there's community that we can connect with. I still think of myself as a person of color because I understand that like that is a political term, and I want to actually be in the activism of that. But I also understand that I would much rather be talked about as a Latina. I really don't like being in the news as like a person of color because I do not have the same experience as my Black and brothers and sisters, you know, Black and brown brothers and sisters. And my sister even has a different experience than me. in that world as she's darker skinned. So, so I really can't wait to just be able to start to nuance the conversation, but I understand that that's like running instead of walking in terms of the theater field, and that we have to start to walk along that path together.
I think we forget sometimes that we don't just do work for our audiences and our volunteers, but also for each other. And I just want to, at Fairview as an example, was something that provoked our staff to have amazing conversations. I'm embarrassed to say, Sean, I've not been to Iron Crow, but I remember the first time I went to see an About Face show when I was living in Chicago. And what queer theater did for me as a relatively younger queer man provoked conversation for me in my personal community and also in the community of theater people that I knew. So sometimes the choir isn't just the people who are seeing the shows, but we're all part of a choir. And as you know, as Maria says, we're not all singing yet from the same hymnal for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for that great conversation. So we're going to go ahead and move to the closing statements, closing remarks. I would just like to ask if each of one of you could say what your favorite part of being an artistic director is. What part have you found the most challenging? And what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is interested in pursuing this career path?
I'd like to start because I want to start with the piece of advice. I feel like I spend my life in the theater just trying not to get bitter. And I want to just say to everyone that there are a lot of people who pursue the arts who have, because it's filled with rejection and difficulty, who get real bitter real fast. And I think that the people who I gravitate towards and tend to then make work with are folks who still see the hope in the thing, who actually have who have basically done everything they can, the jujitsu that they can, to in the moments of rejection and whatever, to actually sort of still carry what the spark is that brought them to the theater in the first place. And so whatever you got to do, meditate, exercise, read art, go to, do the virtual tour of the museum, journal, whatever it is, that my hope that you keep on that hope, you keep holding that of what it is that the theater is meant to be, even amidst in all the rejection and amidst all of the canceling shows and stuff, because that bitterness does not help your art in the long run. It just doesn't. It's really hard to put it aside. So whoever you have to text or whatever you have to do to find that group that helps you find that light and helps your spirit, please do so, because the theater needs you right now. The theater needs you. And then I'll get back to the artistic director questions, but that was the thing I really felt like I needed to say.
And I want to just jump back because that was my instinct, and was to go straight to the advice. And I think it speaks to what Maria just said, which is resiliency, both in everything that just Maria said, but also in your own work. There are going to be shows that you direct that you love, that you're like, this is my break, this is it, this is going to send us through the roof, and people are going to hate it, or the critics are going to pan it, or there are going to be interactions you have, or there are going to be people that you work with that are going to view situations in totally different ways. And so you just have to have the resiliency to know in your heart what is true for you, what is meaningful for you, and why you continue to put this work into the universe, or help others put this work into the universe, because it'll be hard, and it's hard. There are people who don't want to always see that happen. I think who do get bitter, who do have almost what I've learned, that there's almost this vengeance that's breeding in our society right now, that's allowed to sort of come out, I think also because of the election that has passed, and hopefully God, not the election to come. But yes, resiliency. You've got to be true to yourself, know what is true for you, and keep on keeping on.
I think I actually can tell one quick story which answers all three of your questions. For me, when the first time I was an artistic director at a small theater in Chicago called Next Theater, the theater was in disastrous debt, and they really had no right to hire me. They should have declared bankruptcy, but anyway, they didn't. And they hired me. And in my first season, I decided, of all the stupid things I was going to do, I was going to produce Susan Laurie Park's play In the Blood, because that brings them in. And crazy enough at that time, and nobody had professionally done a production of Susan Laurie Park's in all of Chicago at that time. And I hired Lisa Portes to direct, who'd never worked with before, a really fantastic director who I've now worked with again twice more. And there was a scene in it in which a street reverend, basically it's any number of people who screw over this woman, single mother of of 5 kids. And she really needs help, and she goes to the street preacher who is the father of her first child, desperate for money, and basically she gives him oral sex right on the street for a couple of dollars. And I said to Lisa, I said, please, 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 can you figure out a way to stage that so that the audience won't see it? I can't afford to have people running away from my theater. And she said, Jason, you need to trust your audience. And we did. And so that first preview, audience members came out of the preview in tears, and we ended up 2 board members came out of that show, and it was the highest grossing show of the first 3 years of my work at the theater. So so the advice is to trust your audience. The best part of being an artistic director is when that trust pays off that way, and the biggest challenge is getting over my own fear and trusting the audience.
Yeah, gosh, I love what everyone is saying so much, and completely agree. I think piece of advice would be develop a practice of curiosity. Just ensure that there's curiosity embedded in your daily practice, because I think staying curious, staying alive to all that's happening around us is helpful for regardless of what you end up, the path that you end up moving down, but it's really gravitate towards curiosity and curious individuals. The best part of my job is having an opportunity to see the collaborative process, to watch it, from programming to teams to, it's extraordinary to watch the capability of individual humans put together the best ideas to realize work. I love tech. Tech's my favorite part. I love it when we open, but I've always loved tech because I find it, I couldn't do what everyone is doing. And I just think it's so extraordinary to watch it all come together. It just really, really makes me happy. The worst part, can I just say something selfishly? Is that okay? It's just total selfish. Navigating the transition from leadership of an organization for over 20 years to my coming into being an artistic director has been the biggest challenge of my professional life. Trying to figure out a way to, for myself, maintain curiosity when, and sometimes it's not even overt, but there is a world of this isn't how we do it. And that I think is that can be really, really draining for how to refill your own well and stay focused on what you want to bring to the organization and bring out in your staff to move things forward for your community. And that has been for me like really challenging.
Yeah, I want to just jump in on that. So I followed Howard Schawitz, who I think is brilliant, and actually the transit, we get along like hotcakes. I love the guy. I mean, I could spend tons of time with him. He's probably one of the most generous, kind, wonderful human beings to follow as an artistic director. So I feel really good about that. But that doesn't change the fact, for me, I'm having the same issue of the theater company was basically, you know, the last 4 or 5 years of the theater company were the end of Howard's tenure, right? Which means that everybody it was all about, should we continue? Number one, then the answer was yes. So can we hold on to whatever it is that we can to weather the storm of getting a new artistic director, right? And they did wonderfully in that, right? But what that means is that I'm at the beginning of my tenure and everybody is used to, for years now, just holding on tightly to what it is that we've got. So even for a company like Woolly Mammoth that prides itself on innovation and provocation and all this kind of stuff, it's really difficult to change. And the thing that bothers me the most about it, and it's, you know, how human beings just have a negative bias, right? It's like any conversation that is about something new is all about how difficult it's going to be first. And we don't talk about the opportunities with any kind of equal measure or weight to the challenges of the thing. And that feels really demoralizing and difficult because I know that there must be something that I could, like, maybe it's in the way that I'm talking about it. Maybe it's too much too fast. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. I just keep thinking that, like, as a leader, what are the things that I could be doing to help actually have the conversation also include the opportunities there? And by the time we get to the opportunities for a new idea, they all pale in comparison to all of the challenges that come up. And I just want to, you know, I'm really struggling with that. So I actually don't have anything good to say from that other than I'm really struggling from it, because I really adore our staff. And I think that they're some of the most creative minds like I have met. And in these moments, it's really hard to, again, going back to the beginning of this call, move towards a kind of more like at least equal footing or abundant mentality in some way, to think about what could it look like. If it's not that idea that I say, then change it. Then, you know, I work at Woolly freaking Mammoth. Anyway, it's hard.
It's hard. You just have to keep succeeding. And you've already been, I mean, of the transitions that I have recently seen, and we've all seen a lot of transitions lately, I think yours so far is so strong and successful, and a beautiful molding of past and future. And a lot of artistic leaders I see are not managing the transition. And so I will offer one other piece of advice for folks watching. And unfortunately, it was too late for Jenny and Sean and Maria. Don't be afraid of taking over an organization that's in the shit can and about to go down the tubes if you think it has the possibility of succeeding. Nobody has ever handed the reins of a good organization and a healthy organization to me. I took over the National New Play Network when the thing was a piece of shit. Next theater should have been bankrupt. Only theater should have been not only bankrupt, but people were suing it at the time. We were finding lawsuits in the desk drawers for months and months afterwards. You have nowhere to go but up. Anytime you follow a visionary leader, your work is or somebody that everybody loves, it's just going to be really hard. But seriously, if you're an early career potential artistic leader, I would just advise, don't be like, oh yeah, I looked at the balance sheet of that organization where they offered me a job and it's not very positive. I don't think I should take that job. You know what? Jump in and take that friggin' job and prove that you're a savior, because then you can do no wrong.
And just a little secret about my history. I used to work in HR for Apple. And so for 8 years, actually. And I loved the company, loved it, loved it, loved it. And one of the things just you were mentioning, Maria, that might help drive that, because I'm also the same way. I'm like, I want to talk about like the excitement and the opportunity, and like, is just get logistics out of the way and just say, hey, we're having a conversation. I mean, I'm not like, you need this advice, I'm sure you don't, but this is what I do. Is anything that comes up in the conversation that's a logistical thing, off the table. You're going to interrupt yourself. I want somebody else to interrupt, make a sound, like, boop, like, right? Like, we're not entertaining, like, how we're actually going to make it happen. We're just talking about, I want to broadcast a live TYA tour to 15 schools, and I want to do it by August. Let's have that conversation. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's one of the things that we literally make sounds. Like, we literally like, like, it's the most crazy thing in the world if you ever sat in on one of these meetings. But it just helps us all remember in like a fun way, like, oh, we're getting trapped in like, you know, what's going to be challenging or difficult, and not like what this could actually mean for the people we want to serve.
You know what you can do is record those. And you know what I mean? And we can all use them. I can have a little button that's like Sean and his like, you know, crazy Cardi B noise.
Yeah. We'll put it in QLab for everyone. It'll be a set of cues you can execute.
Well, I would like to thank you all for this amazing conversation, and I want to thank everyone who will be watching this. And I hope to have a conversation with you guys again soon.